Hello, everyone. This is Chaz Kayato. Today I'm doing something a little bit different than what I normally do. And so decided I'd like to start doing some more blog style videos as opposed to just, the videos that I currently do, more formal, generally have, something specific that I'm trying to get across. Whereas some of these blogs are more just discussion, and I'd love to, have you guys enter the conversation as well with some of the comments below. So I actually was originally thinking about doing this outside, but it's a little overcast today, and maybe even a little bit of rain. So just figured I'll go to my normal spot and just kind of see where it goes. But if you don't like these types of videos, I get it. Um, Please continue to look at my other videos. But if you do like, sometimes just a reflective blog to listen to, especially if you have a long trip that you're taking right now, just listen to this and see if you glean anything from it. So the topic of today's discussion is value versus values. And so also because this is a little unstructured, I might bounce around a lot. So it might be a little bit more stream of consciousness. There may be, points where I stop, pause, think. So once again, if this is the style of video you enjoy, hopefully you'll get something out of it. But like I said, value versus values. So this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. What the meaning of value is, how it differs from values, and what does this mean for us? What does this mean for professionals? What does this mean for non-professionals? What does this mean for, students? What does it mean for anyone out there? So thinking about the word value, essentially, I believe that the term value means something that can be either counted, so something that has a definitive amount, or something that adds to something else, but doesn't necessarily have a countable measure. And we'll kind of go into that a little bit further because I know that's that's a really um, that's an answer that doesn't have a whole lot of grounding. So I guess let's start off with just value in terms of countable, right? So this is really easy to understand. So if you are, if you work for a business, you have different ways to look at value. If from the standpoint of the people that run the business, from the administration of the business, you have a specific value, right? You have a certain amount of money that you cost the business each year, in the hopes of your work being able to produce more income for the business than the cost that it takes to employ you, right? So there is that value that exists, and then you what you consider is the value of your time, right? You chose a business because of the fact that, well, I get paid this certain amount of money, and that's what I value my time as, whether that be hourly, whether that be weekly, yearly. You've essentially decided, I believe that my value is this. Well, to a certain extent, right? So sometimes we do believe our value is more than what we're being paid, but maybe we just haven't had the opportunity at that point to um, to reach that, to get a position that matches what we believe our value is at. Okay, so that's the simple countable value. Same thing with whatever you purchase at the store, right? You don't buy things that you don't believe have the value of the sticker price, right? And you wouldn't sell a product that you believe has a value less than the sticker price because of the fact that people won't buy it, because if you believe it and you're the one that sells it, the consumer definitely believes that. So that is the countable value. But then what about uncountable value? Well, this is really simple to understand because uh, the relationships that you have, whether it be friends or family, that has value in your life, but it's uncountable, right? You don't say, well, being friends with this person adds $100 of value per day to my life. It just doesn't work out that way. That value comes from the emotions that you get from being around that person, the feeling of completeness that may come with being around that person, and then just, sometimes bonds, particularly, through family or through friendships that have gone through periods of, abundance and then tension and back and forth. You have these uh, uncountable this has uncountable value to your life, and so there's really those two major ways of looking at value. um, so what about values? Because this is a similar word but doesn't necessarily mean the same thing, right? So values, it's not just the plural of value. um, Values we would consider to be the things that we hold to be important, right? Our values are, well, I believe I should treat people with respect, right? So those are the values that I hold. I believe in, maybe, with the denomination of whatever religion that you have, those are values that you hold. Very often, values and morality can can overlap, right? If we believe that we should treat everyone with respect, even the people that we disagree with, well, that would be a moral belief, but also, your values, the way that you interact with with people. So morality and values have um, quite a bit of overlap. So once again, values isn't necessarily a um, it's not necessarily a plural of value, especially when we're talking about countable value. Those are just things that how we define the value of, and I'm using the word to describe it, but how we describe what is the worth of the time that we invest in something, right? So, what is all this to say? Why are we talking about values? Well, in in the real world, which we all live in, we have to choose what we think, what we think uh, these different values, how they all align, and we structure our lives generally based on these values, right? So you've chosen a job that hopefully meets the value that you put on yourself, and then hopefully the people that you work for um, reciprocate that value. And then, maybe you're listening and you are a you're a employer and you have employees. Hopefully you are seeing the value, or you are meeting your employees at the value that they believe that they have. And so why is this important? Why is having a common accepted value, countable value for employees so important? Well, because the countable value and the acceptance of the countable value will have a drastic bearing on whether that person feels valuable to an organization. So if I believed that my value was, just making it up, $20 an hour, right? And I'm being paid $10 an hour. Well, I'm going to have a big disconnect. I'm going to have this belief that I'm not I'm not being whether that be respected. I mean, you could definitely see people having an opinion where if I was respected more, I would be paid more, right? So there's that. But then also, um, you might say, well, why don't you just get another job? And that is true, right? You could get another job that you believe will respect you more. But it's not always that simple, right? We do also understand that sometimes we can be kind of slaves to the moment where, you know, maybe it's just on that next horizon and I'm not there yet to go get that next job. Maybe there's some hurdles that I have to go over in order to um, get to that place that I need to be at so that I can leave my current job. So that's definitely something that warrants consideration, right? Because if you have employees or you are an employee that has that disconnect and you don't feel that you have the respect, you don't believe that your value is being accurately represented in the countable measure, it's going to affect the quality of work that you put in. Okay. Now, that could go both ways, right? It could be the case that because you want to be seen more, you will work harder, you will outwork what you consider to be the value, the countable value. So if I think that I'm, making $10 an hour, but I'm worth 20, I may increase the output that I'm putting in at work in order to be recognized by that administration, by my boss, um, by my project manager, in order to get to that point where I can go and say, hey, I feel that I am an asset to this business, and I feel that I am worth more per hour, per week, per year, whatever it is. And then you can ask that, right? But that's only going to go on for so long. You're not going to indefinitely work for more than you're being paid. Once again, it's relative to your own beliefs, right? Some people may have that same job and say, you know what, I'm worth $10 an hour. Or maybe they devalue themselves. Maybe they think they're actually worth $8 an hour, and they feel like they might be getting away with a little bit. I'm getting paid $10 an hour, but I would do this for 8, right? So, but that countable value still matters, right? Because it's how the person views how they interact, and their connection to the business. So um, that is there is an important connection there. So just note that the way the person feels connected to the value that they're getting paid versus the value that they believe they're at, that can that can definitely make a big difference on the quality of work that they put together. And in that instance of outworking, if I believe I'm worth $20 an hour, but I'm being paid 10, but I'm working really hard to show. If I don't get that, if I don't get that raise, you know, that could severely impact my um, the amount that I'm willing to do in that job, right? I may say to myself, well, you know what? I don't feel respected. So I went over and above, and this company doesn't really appreciate me. That could be a pretty poor situation for the employee and also for the employer. Because if the people that you employ feel that you don't respect them, you're going to have low morale, and you're going to have employees that just really are not getting the work that you think that they should be doing done, right? Because an unmotivated employee is going to say, "Well, I'll do what I feel like I'm able to do today without having any, situations or having any, uh, you know, recourse with management." So anyway, so that's countable value, right? But let's talk about the uncountable value that you may have with the business. So I've already mentioned it a little bit. If you are adding to a business if you're adding to relationships within that business, then there is this uncountable. You can't say, well, I enjoy working here. What is the monetary value of enjoying working somewhere? Well, you really can't. It's hard. I mean, to be fair, you could potentially put it in monetary value terms rather, if this were the situation. If you said, well, I have an option to work at job A, and maybe job A is going to pay me more, or I can stay at job B, but job A, I may not enjoy as much as job B. And maybe the difference between those two, maybe that's $5,000 a year, right? And so if you chose to stay at job B, then maybe in that sense, you could put a monetary value on enjoyment, right? But it doesn't always work that way. Um, Sometimes it's the case where you're very much willing to deal with more if you are being paid more, because if you do get paid less, it could also affect you in other areas of life, right? So if I'm working at one job and I get paid $10,000 more than this other opportunity that I have, which may be easier, it may be the case that it is something that you may like more, but you also recognize that there's a material difference in how your life would be by switching jobs, um, maybe the vacations that you take each year, you wouldn't be able to do that because you have 10,000 less dollars to work with, or maybe you have a lot of bills that you're working through at the time. Those, those are all factors that may mean that you're willing to do something that you don't appreciate as much, just because of the fact that you don't want to find yourself in, um, a financial situation that um, doesn't allow you the same quality of life. So, so there we go. So that is the non-countable way of thinking about, why do I work at this place? What rationale do I have for staying? Um, how do I value the connection that I have to the business? Do I form an identity because of the connection I have to the business? So, and then values, right? We've touched on values um, in terms of, you know, uh, it can overlap with morality. It can overlap with just how you believe professionalism should happen, right? So, one of the biggest issues that many people have is when they see there being different standards for different people within an organization. And granted, to be fair, that is a natural occurrence in the sense that if you are if you're a manager, if you're an administrator, there probably is going to be a higher burden for you, because you are a representation of the decision makers within an organization, and so the actions that you take are probably going to have a more profound impact on the success of an organization than someone that's more low level, right? And it also tends to be that those people that are more low level are going to come and go a bit quicker than someone that is higher level. So you may if you are within an organization and you believe that high standards should be kept for all professionals, and then you see members of administration or members of management having lower standards for themselves, or having lower, or choosing to have lower standards for other people than you feel that you have, well, once again, that is going to create an issue with uh, the uncountable value that you have within an organization, right? Because you'll start to feel disconnected from that organization if you feel that wedge because of the values of the management. So the values of management can actually drive a wedge between the value that you see within an organization. And if you do that too often, if there's just too many wedges or too big of a wedge between um, the values that you find an organization has, and then the value that you see between yourself and the people within that organization. Generally, this is where it leads to, oftentimes people leaving the organization, or people choosing to lower their standards within that organization because they see, well, why am I going to keep high standards for myself if the management, if administration, if there's no real consensus on what is um, correct decorum and whatnot. So yeah, that is a broad overview of those three things, right? Countable value, uncountable value, and values. So um, if you are someone who is in a business and you are in a management position, in a position of authority, in an administrative position, these are things that you need to think about often. All right. If you don't, you may find yourself in a position where the employees under you uh, don't, um, they either are not giving their best or you're going to deal with high turnover. And so that gets to more of a business aspect. So I'm going to kind of shift a little bit over to um, discussing like a practicality of this. So uh, it's pretty well known that high turnover when it comes to a business is never good. But it really, what it some of the obvious negatives. Well, every time you have someone new come in, oftentimes you have to spend money training them, right? So if you have 20 people come into your business over the course of 5 years, you're going to spend a lot of money on training, right? So you're constantly training because these people are coming and going. Whereas if you can have 2 to 4 people hired during those 5 years, you won't have to spend as much money and as much resources training those people because they're going to stay with you, and you won't have to constantly replace them. So, not to mention, you also have to consider advertising for those positions, right? So, it's not just training, but then you have to spend time. You have to spend time advertising and then interviewing, and and those resources are not infinite, right? So it's pretty important that management, it's pretty important that administration, you are thinking about how do I retain the people that I have? And how do you retain them is you make sure you are addressing the values, okay? Am I giving them the countable value that they believe they have? Am I giving them the enriched value, the non-countable value that they believe they need within this organization? Do they feel that connection? And then also, are the values of the organization being shown and being kept, or, as I've mentioned, or are the values of the organization just something that you say, but then really don't actually back up, right? So if you can address those, you will have less turnover. But let's talk about a reality of the situation in the modern professional world. So in the past, in the 1900s, particularly, it was the case where people stayed at their jobs for very long amounts of time. A part of that was due to pensions, right? So if you had a pension, you pretty much had to stay at that company for as long as possible to build your pension because you couldn't take that pension. It wasn't like a 401k where, okay, well, I'm going to go roll it over with this other company if I leave, right? So you would have people that would stay with the company for 30 years, and that was actually pretty common for someone to have a long-term, um, a long-term career with one particular company. Well, we saw in the 1970s the rise of the 401k, and it started to shift. And there's a whole bunch of economic reasons, from really the um, middle 40 years of the 1900s. So you're talking about, like, around 1930 to 1970. Whole lot of economic um, stuff happens in America during that time. Depressions, booms, busts, a whole lot, whole lot of things happen during that time, and it affects the demographics of who's in the workforce. It affects the way people start to view um, their careers, right? And so it slowly trickles down to where we get to the early 2000s. And by the time we get to the early 2000s, we've pretty much, most businesses have gotten rid of the pension plan. And these still exist some places, but not many places. So we've gotten rid of the pension plan. You have your 401k retirement plan for many places. Um, and so people start to lose the connection that you might foster, the value that you might see within one particular organization. People start to lose that. And so you start to see higher and higher turnover. So what was once the case where you'd have decades worth of um, people staying at one particular job, that's not the case anymore, right? You start to see people more and more leaving their jobs. So one statistic, um, so some statistics that I'm looking at, according to USA Facts, as of January 2024, the median tenure for U.S. workers is just 3.9 years, down from 4.1 years in 2022, making it the lowest level since 2002. While many workers stay for several years, a significant portion, 22%, stay less than 1 year. Tenure varies widely by age. So basically 2.7 years for the 25 to 34 demographic, and then 9.9 years for the 55 plus demographic. And those are the people that I'm talking about that are on the tail end of that phasing out of um, pensions, right? Now, those people, probably many of them don't have pensions, but it was still that mindset that was being phased out, where no, you stay at a place for a long time. And so this is kind of concerning, because what are we where is this job market heading? And how will leaders approach the changing demographics? Because with the rise of technology, I think we can all look at the changes that have happened in our own workplaces. I mean, even just the past few years. I mean, think about it. Think about how you view a career from, the way you looked at it in January of 2020 versus how you view it now, right? So just thinking about the pandemic, way different way that we view careers. And then in the past 3 years, you kind of can think of things as like pre and post AI. Now, look, AI has been around for decades, right? But the way we can use AI is just so much different now. I mean, you you can have whole call centers run by AI, and they might actually be doing just as good um, as AI or call centers prior to that. Because I could tell you, having to call a call center to get information or to try to talk to someone prior to the rise of AI wasn't easy, as it wasn't easy back then. it often took 3 or 4 calls to get to someone that could even answer your question. So um, so AI is able to replace jobs. I think it's something that a common a common uh, retort that I would hear when I was talking about the future of AI vehicles, and people would say, "Well, we can't have AI cars. Think about how many accidents you'd have." And I'm thinking to myself, we have more than enough accidents without AI. Yes, there will be, AI isn't perfect, and there will be accidents, but even if it's a fraction of a percentage, um, wouldn't that be wouldn't that be better for liability reasons for companies? Wouldn't that be better for um, a whole host I mean, even just the practicality of if you get in a car accident, you don't have a vehicle for a while. Well, if AI is, if trucks are getting in less accidents because AI is driving them, well, we that's less people that you have to pay. Um, Particularly if they get hurt and have to go to the hospital, you have less cost there. But also your physical vehicles, you have less physical vehicles that are off the road. So, we're definitely looking at a time period where there's no one particular career field that you can say definitively, well, I will be unaffected. My career trajectory will be unaffected by the use of AI in the future. So, anyways, so going back, how does that all tie into management? Once again, if you are someone who is a manager, you have to think about these real, tangible, um, effects to the people that work for you, because AI could affect the value that they have, right? AI could mean that, well, since I've outsourced part of your job, you're outsourced it to AI, right? The value, the countable value that you present to a business is lower now, because I don't need you to do X, Y, and Z things. I just need you to do X and Y. Z is being done by technology. And so the countable value of someone will go down. And there are other factors at play. You think about, yes, inflation is always affecting countable values. So we're kind of talking about outside of inflation right now. Nominal dollars. Um, and so the you have that, the countable value, but then also the more you the more you put or the more you take off someone's plate, maybe because of that technological piece, you also think about, well, how does that affect the mindset, the psyche of the person that's being affected there? Perhaps, depending, they may be appreciative and they may say, well, you know what, the fact that I don't have to do that thing anymore is awesome. I am so glad that technology was able to take that off my plate. Um, it could be a positive thing, or it could be a negative thing, right? Maybe that thing, maybe that Z item that they no longer do, maybe that was an important element of why that person felt connected to their business. Okay, maybe they derived value, that uncountable value, from that thing that they no longer have now. So managers need to keep that in mind. And then also, technology doesn't always mean that everything is simpler. Particularly like just in the teaching profession, now you're very much responsible for trying to figure out if students are using AI to get around doing their work. And so this has created more work for teachers. And you have to make a decision. Okay, does this mean that I'm going to have to try to become proficient at uh, reading something and determining if it's AI? Do I trust that I can put it through an AI checker and that AI checker is going to give me a correct response, in terms of AI was really used? Um, uh, you know, there's a whole lot of Are you going to go to pen and paper now because you can't trust students to use a computer in front of them? So, in that sense, maybe that actually puts more strain on an employee, and maybe it lessens what that value that they feel, that connection that they feel, because they 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 no longer feel as satisfied or fulfilled because of the fact that this is a new element that has become more difficult to deal with. And so, this kind of also, I want to bring up something that I've heard in the past, which I just don't believe it to be true. Is people will talk about, well, careers that may be phased out or may be severely affected by a technology, they'll be okay because in through the grand scheme of history, every time there's been technological advancements, old occupations have faded away or changed with new occupations, or previous occupations changing. Um, and I think that's really foolish to think of that, because when the previous industrial revolution, um, sure, we all of a sudden we have cars and trains. We don't need horses as much, but it didn't just go away. Horses didn't just stop being useful in the span of a year, right? It took several decades, and the people that were people that did work with horses, that occupation slowly faded as one generation um, kind of took the reins on that. And then as that generation was no longer working, that's kind of how that worked, right? It didn't. It took several decades for people to even be able to afford a car. So if you used horses and the car came around, it's not like just overnight, all of a sudden, okay, great. Well, I don't need my horse anymore. No. So even the Industrial Revolution that we saw in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that's very different than, okay, well, 2 months ago, um, 2 months ago, this technology didn't exist, and now it does, and now my job is getting very close to being able to be completely replaced by AI. So that's something that people need to consider, and then that is also something that, um, once again, managers, administrators need to think about, what is the psyche that their employees have in relation to that. If someone feels that they're potentially being replaced at any given corner, then they're going to have serious issues with that um, uncountable value and their connections to the workplace. So, employees and employers, that's just something that maybe those are conversations that need to be had. So, yeah, so that's the talk about values that I wanted to talk about today. It's something really different than what I'd done previously. And if you watch this whole video, then awesome. I don't really know if I should make a separate page for these talks, but I do think that there is some value in listening to people talk about this type. I know that I love to listen to these types of videos on YouTube where someone just kind of goes through and explains their thoughts on a certain matter. Sometimes I'll listen to someone talking about economics. Sometimes I'll listen to someone talking about professional careers. Sometimes I'll listen to people talking about just a whole host of different topics. And then I try to figure out, well, where does that apply to my life? Where does that apply to um, where I think I'm going, and how have I been affected by where I've been? And we just live in a world that is changing very, very quickly. Some ways good, some ways not so good. But either way, it's kind of like a freight train. You can't really stop it, right? There's no one individual that's going to be able to say, I have the power to um, take everything that's happening right now and make it go back to the way it was. It's not going to happen. So we kind of need to think about these ideas. We kind of need to think about um, where we're going and how does that affect our career path. And then particularly if you are someone who is an administrator, if you are someone that is a manager, someone in a position of authority, you need to think really strong and hard about how your actions, how the values that you are putting into the business, how they show themselves, how they evidence themselves, because for the employees, that's going to affect how they believe their countable value is, and then also obviously how you believe their countable value is, but then also how they value their time there and how they value the connection that they have to that organization. And if you lose that middle one, if you lose that connection value, you've you've gone. It's going to be tough to come back from that. And so if it's one or two employees and you have a large company, life goes on, right? But if you have a lot of employees and you lose that morale because you have um, deviated from what created value, then you have a whole you have a serious problem there, um, because that just goes beyond just a small percentage, and then a morale issue within an organization. Yeah, that presents a whole host of problems, and that is like an institutional problem. And if you have institutional problems, you're going to be operating at a level lower than what you're capable of. So, think about how you interact with your employees. Think about how you interact with um, the people around you. Because if you have different set of values for different people, it'll be noticed, and that will affect in the future of your organization. So I've gone on pretty long now. Thank you so much if you listened all the way to the end. Maybe I'll do more of these. We'll see. But it is good sometimes to just kind of talk through some of these ideas. So